Since the 5 o'clock advisory, Idalia has strengthened. It's moving north of 14 miles per hour, but those winds are now up to 80 miles per hour, gusts to 90. And this thing's trying to wrap itself up a little bit on the satellite imagery, trying to wrap itself up. So we are likely going to see a big increase in those max winds over the next 24 to about 30 hours before landfall. I think landfall is going to happen sometime late tomorrow morning, but the latest 8 o'clock advisory just came in. These are one of those intermediate advisories. So we actually every 3 hours will get updates on this storm now, but it's every 6 hours at 5 a.m., 11 a.m., 5 p.m. and 11 a.m. that we get new tracks. So this is a new update with the position and the strength of this storm moving north at 14 miles per hour. Hurricane hunters are in it right now. They've got several more missions scheduled throughout the day today, as again, we want to know where exactly the storm's going to go. And this has been an interesting one to watch the last 48 hours. Idalia moved very slowly, meandering off the Yucatan Peninsula, and the jog with it eastward of where a lot of the models were predicting, that's kind of been an interesting facet the last 24 hours. But now it's a hurricane pulling away from Cuba. This thing is picking up speed. It's getting steered northward, and eventually it's going to get steered northeast. So this is the latest cone of uncertainty from the National Hurricane Center, becoming a Category 2 later today, then the 3 overnight as it's approaching land. Now that landfall is going to happen sometime late morning to about midday tomorrow. And once it moves inland, of course, it's going to weaken because it's cut off from its warm ocean water supply. That's how hurricanes get their fuel. That's how they get their steam. That's how they get their strength. So once it starts interacting with land, moving over land, it will gradually weaken as it moves further inland. But that landfall going to happen along the Big Bend of Florida. And that's really important to talk about, is the positioning as this is coming in is kind of a maximum storm surge right near Cedar Key. Okay, so if you know where that is, it's about an hour drive away from Gainesville, Florida, and really significant storm surge possible there. But as this moves inland, I think the center of Idalia is going to go over Georgia. And at that point, it could still be a hurricane at times. And that's why the National Weather Service has put out a hurricane warning for Valdosta. So that includes Valdosta State. Now, the center of the storm will stay well away from North Georgia. So that's good. We're going to be on the western side of it, which is the better side of the two sides of the storm to be on. If we were on the eastern side, we'd call that the dirty side here in North Georgia. That's where you get more rain, higher winds, and more of an inland tornado threat. So the feeder bands that wrap around it, on the eastern side of it, we get that tornado threat often. All right, let's talk about how this thing is going to strengthen. Now, over the weekend and yesterday, it was still battling a little bit of wind shear, but now that this thing's getting into the Gulf of Mexico, the wind shear is going to come down today. And you're going to see a big transformation because wind shear can inhibit the storm growth. We're not going to see that as much today. What we are going to see is it's moving over this prime area in the Gulf of Mexico. It's not just warm at the surface. There's some depth to that warmth with this storm where it's going to head. So this thing will strengthen, a rapid intensification. We need a lack of wind shear. We need that nice fuel in the ocean with the warm waters, and we also need moist air around it. I don't think we're going to have too much dry air in training that storm. So everything tells us that Idalia is going to strengthen significantly. Let me show you the tropical storm watches and warnings for the state of Georgia, because we're broadcasting here from in Atlanta. We don't have any warnings or watches out for North Georgia or the metro, and I don't expect them for North Georgia either. But you notice here there's some red down in southern Georgia right along 75. That's Valdosta. So we have a hurricane warning there. Then from Brunswick westward in this blue color, we have a tropical storm warning. Then for the Savannah area, that's currently a tropical storm watch. I expect that to be upgraded to a warning later today. And they issue those warnings 24 hours from when those conditions will arrive. There's also storm surge warnings and storm surge watches. So those storm surge warnings run all the way from the northern side of the Fort Myers area up through Tampa Bay, all the way around to Apalachicola. Okay, Apalachicola is right about here. Then on the eastern coast of Georgia up to Florida, they have storm surge watches. So here in Georgia along the coast, we are expecting storm surge. And the reason why is we're going to have onshore flow, onshore meaning the winds are blowing onto the shoreline, not just as this thing's making landfall, but as it cuts across Georgia with the winds around it It's going to be onshore flow, so it will cause some storm surge flooding there. But the peak storm surge is going to happen close to landfall. You see all these colors in red? Let me zoom in on the map. These red areas are greater than 9 feet above ground level. You cannot survive in a one-story house with 9 feet of storm surge. We see this happen every single year when we get these major hurricanes that come in and make landfall. You got to hide from the wind, run from the water, and run from the water indeed you do have to do. So there's mandatory evacuations along the coast. You got to hope everybody is taking those seriously. In Ian last year, over 100 deaths attributed to that floodwater. Cedar Key, Horseshoe Beach, these are vacation spots, popular vacation spots. These are all going to be underwater with at least 9 feet of storm surge expected. Let's head down to the Tampa-St. Pete area. This is St. Pete right here. And the beaches, all these places are expected to get greater than 3 feet above ground floodwater, storm surge. Also, this is Tampa Bay. This is the old Tampa Bay. This is South Tampa right here. That's an Air Force base right there. As the storm's making landfall, the winds, this is for late tonight through early Wednesday, they're going to push water into the bay. And what that water is going to do is it's going to try to go up into the little waterways and inlets, but it has nowhere to go because it's the same time going to be raining. So that water is going to build up in Tampa Bay. This is St. Pete right here. Look at this, storm surge flooding, greater than 6 feet possible. And some of these right along the coastline, these might be natural wetlands, but all along here, people live right in here. These areas also have potentially, that's the Air Force Base right here, some flooding possible there, very flood prone part of South Tampa. Also Tampa General, that's a hospital that is located right in here. I believe it's this island, one of these islands right in here. They have put up their aqua gates. It's a new storm surge flooding barrier system that they got, and they tested it out for the first time with Ian last year. But those will help prevent flooding of the hospital, which is the level 1 trauma center there in Tampa. Let's go into the Georgia coastline, talk about how much storm surge flooding we're expected there. I'm kind of zooming in closer to the Brunswick area. A lot of places are going to get in some of these barrier islands greater than 3 feet potentially. And this is worst case scenario. Tybee Island, very popular vacation spot. There, we're looking at about greater than 3 feet of storm surge possible. And of course, Charleston floods very easily on even a sunny day. And they're expecting a lot of storm surge there as well that could be greater than 3 feet. And one thing that's important to note is that we have a little supermoon happening tonight. And when we get these supermoons and full moons in general, we can end up seeing higher than normal high tides at full moons. So we will see how that attributes at high tide with a supermoon, with a hurricane incoming, what some of these floodwaters and storm surge levels will end up doing. Let's talk about the winds though, okay? Because with tropical systems, you often look at the cone of uncertainty, the cone, and you think, oh, I'm not in the cone, doesn't matter. Nope, not right. Tropical storm winds, hurricane force winds, it can extend well outside the center. In fact, I'm going to look up the stats on this storm right now for the exact number of miles outside the center of the storm that those tropical storm force winds go. But they go hundreds of miles sometimes outside the center. Let's see if I can get the location right now, about 135 miles west-southwest of the Dry Tortugas. Let's see if I have to go to the discussion, I think. I'm going on my phone to their discussion. I'll find it towards the end of this, I think. Inundation, 8 to 12 feet at the max. Let's see. Trying to find it on my phone, can't find it. So let's keep going here and then we'll look up how far outside the center it goes. But I'm going to show you these little polygons drawn on here. This is at this point the forecast time frame when it's a Category 3 hurricane tomorrow morning. This is how far outside the center, that's several hundred miles, that the tropical storm force winds are going to extend. You see it extends well inland. Well, once you get into this little red dot right there, that's the eye wall. That's where the hurricane force winds are going to be. And once you get to this orange color polygon on the map, that's where the wind gusts could be, the wind field, 57 miles per hour or higher. So that's like the threshold of a severe thunderstorm warning, essentially. All right, as this thing makes its way inland, from Gainesville all the way to Valdosta. Look at that, expecting these winds above 60 miles per hour. And in fact, the hurricane winds themselves, as this is gradually weakening as it moves on shore, might head over Valdosta, and we might see those hurricane strength winds. And that's why they're in that hurricane warning. As it moves further across the Savannah area, there could be some wind gusts around hurricane force in Savannah. And then this eventually will move offshore, taps into warm waters, doesn't weaken altogether. So there will be impacts felt well outside the center of the storm and well outside where that first landfall happens. Now, what about us in North Georgia? Well, the center of this storm is far enough away from us to where we don't think we're going to see tropical storm force winds. In fact, we're in a pretty good setup where we might get some rain. It might be a breezy day tomorrow, but we're really not expecting a high impact scenario. I'm actually more concerned about the flood threats for later this afternoon than I am any impacts from Idalia here later tomorrow. But you see, I put tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the evening as the storm is getting closer to Savannah on the map. So you can see as you get closer to Eatonton, Macon area, yeah, it might gust 25 to 30 miles per hour. But here in the metro, I mean, gust 20, 25, that's just a breezy day for us. It's not even really considered windy outside. So it'll turn breezy tomorrow afternoon through tomorrow evening. Then the storm will start pulling away into the Carolinas, and we will see those breezy winds kind of subsiding a bit into Thursday. So breezy, some rain, not expecting widespread, heavy, really strong tropical storm force winds, anything like that here in North Georgia tomorrow. But let me show you the forecast track, big picture. See Idalia right here. As we get into later today, that strengthening continuing. You see that eye wall right there. Meanwhile, on the east coast, on the west coast of Florida and throughout the peninsula, you see these little bands of heavy rain. Those are the feeder bands, the tropical feeder bands. As these start coming on shore later on today, each of those are like squally weather. You get heavy rain, you get gusty winds, and that's where the inland tornado threat ends up being. Okay, so each of those, even into this afternoon, have to watch out for that tornado threat, even though the storm itself is still almost the width of Florida off the coast. All right, so it moves a little further north overnight, then it gets steered by a dip in the jet stream, a trough coming in. That trough's going to kick it to the east. So it's going north now, it goes north through today, goes north through early tonight, then it starts getting kicked east. And that's what we've been trying to figure out. When does that east kick happen? Does it happen in here? Does it happen in here? In here? Well, that's what this model says. It says it's going to make landfall right in here. So just north, that's Cedar Key right there. So it'd be just north of Cedar Key, which would maximize their storm surge. If you're wondering if you have vacation houses along 30A, or like to vacation there, Panama City out towards Destin, the Emerald Coast, they're on the better side of the storm. Offshore wind, that's also a good setup for them where they don't see the storm surge effect. Okay, so that's why there's no storm surge warnings in those areas. Let's push this further past landfall. This is tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, and landfall could happen at 8 in the morning. It could happen at 11. This model is just a model. It's not exact for when that landfall is going to happen, but the center of this likely passes just east of Tallahassee and just west of Lake City. Lake City's right in here. So it's going to be passing. That eye wall could pass right over Valdosta and the state line and the rest stop there at the state line. Then we see Wednesday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, moving pretty quickly, traveling through southeast Georgia. So Statesboro right there, very heavy rain. Right now they're under a tropical storm watch that will likely be upgraded into a warning later on. And the center of this, whatever's left of that eye or that main circulation, might pass over Savannah as well. And then look at this, by Thursday morning, this thing is racing off the coast and out of the area. What you didn't see was widespread rain in Atlanta on that map. Okay, that's because I don't think that we're going to see widespread rain for all the metro. But I do think that there's a difference in some of our models. That model I just showed you, I'm going to back up for a second so you can see. We'll zoom past this landfall and out to tomorrow afternoon. It brings some of a little outer feeder bands. Well, really wouldn't call them feeder bands, but outer little rain bands on the western side of it. Brings a few of them into the metro, but that steady rain is really composed south and east of our area altogether. This model is more conservative in the rainfall department for how far west that gets. I'll show you another model in a second that brings that rain further west into our area, but it still wouldn't be the really heavy stuff with the strong winds. It would just be a breezy, more rainy day. So right now we have rainfall chances for tomorrow here from Idalia. 30% northwest side of the metro. That goes up to 50% southeast side of the metro. And then by Macon and Eatonton kind of areas out towards Milledgeville, that rain becomes likely. And I'll show you this forecast track here. We call this the HRRR model. High resolution rapid refresh. So this is more aggressive in how far it brings that rain north and west versus the other model I just showed you a second ago. So this one says that as we get into tomorrow afternoon, that widespread rain could get all the way to the I-85 corridor. Remember, the other one had it all the way to Eatonton. So that's about a 60-mile difference in where it thinks that westward side of Idalia will end up being. But this would be still just breezy with rain. The rain would be lighter in nature. The really heavy-duty stuff, again, stays out of our area. But this pulls it up into our area for the afternoon and evening, so some tropical rain possible, but I don't know if we're definitely going to see that rain, the steady rain getting all the way to I-85. A lot of our models don't bring it that far, so we'll see how things unfold, but right now we do think it'll be a breezy day. Some of us will have a wet day tomorrow, others of us will have just a breezy and slightly cooler day tomorrow. This will bring cloud cover, if nothing else, and breezy northeast wind, which drives in some cooler air down the mountains. So for us, if you don't get the rain, it might not be that bad of a day outside. Here's a model comparison. This still shows you the differences in how much rain we're expecting. The European model only has about an inch total. That includes what might fall today. Okay, that includes what might fall today from scattered showers and storms. And then it has the heavier rain staying east of Eatonton, with those rain totals staying for most of us less than an inch. All right, so what we're watching, kind of recapping things. Idalia is now a hurricane this morning, going to become a major hurricane by landfall. Where it makes landfall and just east of it, there is a significant threat of catastrophic storm surge. That could be in excess of 9 feet. You can't survive in a one-story house in that, and it comes up into the second story. Okay, inland tornadoes, of course, the winds right along that eye wall will be detrimental. Okay, but in North Georgia, we think the center of the storm as it's moving through Georgia will stay south and east of our area, so we will see some rain southeast of Atlanta tomorrow, and it will be breezy, but we're not expecting widespread heavy rain, really strong winds. We're not going to see any of that. I do think that honestly, my gut tells me today's rain is a higher impact for us than what tomorrow's will end up being. All right, I also want to show you Franklin. If we didn't have Idalia, this would be a huge headline. This thing's a monster. This has winds of 130 miles per hour. That's the newest update. It had, I believe it was 140 at the last advisory before this one, but it's category 4. Oh, let me go check on that actually. This is gust to 165, moving north-northeast at 9 miles per hour. So it's category 4. Bermuda is in a tropical storm warning there, but the only impacts for the East Coast from this is that it really churns up some large swell. So that does cause a high rip current risk, and also the factor of having some larger surf. So that's what we're tracking in the tropics. Idalia and Franklin, Idalia and Franklin. And while I have you guys here on YouTube, I want to touch a little bit on what we're seeing today out there, because I also think this is important. We still have 3 flash flood warnings remaining, that heavy rain right over I-85. And I just want to show you the forecast track for today. This brings in, by the afternoon, another round of scattered showers and thunderstorms, some of them going to produce those really heavy tropical downpours. We saw that cause flooding yesterday. It could cause flooding again today. This model is more conservative with the rain, so it brings some of the tropical rains up towards Atlanta area, but it's not as widespread, and then it pulls it out into Wednesday evening. So again, that is the latest on Idalia. It is a tropical, or rather a category 1 hurricane. Winds are 80 miles per hour, gusts to 90. This thing is going to unfold today and become significant strengthening. Is going to push it into category 2 this afternoon and category 3 overnight before that eventual landfall. If you know somebody, or you're watching here and you're under one of those storm surge warnings, if you're in an evacuation zone and you've been told that you're under a mandatory evacuation, please take it seriously. They issue those for the water. They don't issue the mandatory evacuations for the wind. We know the wind can cause roof damage, tree damage, all of that, but it is the water that can be deadly. So please take that seriously. Our next update comes in at 11. We'll be sure to get on here on YouTube, 11 Alive Plus and 11alive.com. Give you another update with what the latest is as hurricane hunters survey Idalia as it is already strengthening and going to significantly strengthen later on today.